Good afternoon, everyone. We will be starting in a minute. We're just waiting for the Zoom app to let everyone in before we start. Again, good afternoon. We have quite a crowd today. We're going to start in a minute. We're just waiting for the Zoom app to consolidate and let everyone in the webinar before we officially start. I can see the majority of our attendees already able to get in. Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Amin Minena. I'm the technical coordinator with the Municipal Engineers Association, and welcome to our webinar today on the overview of the approved 2023 Municipal Class Environmental Assessment. Some housekeeping items before we start. This webinar is being recorded and will be posted on our website. So you'd be able to view it on your own time, share it with your team, and review the slides as well. For questions, we won't, due to the number of people that signed in, we won't be able to answer questions live. Please do post your questions using the Q&A function. It's important to use the Q&A function, not the chat function, so that we can look at it after the webinar. And our MCEA advisor and presenter for today, Paul Knowles, will look at the questions. Again, due to the number of people, we expect a huge number of questions. He might not be able to get through all of them, but at least it'll give us some guidance towards what to focus on in next presentations and webinars. And with that, I won't take too much of your time and the presenter's time. Our presenter today, I'm sure you're all familiar with him, is Paul Knowles. He's the Municipal Class EA Expert Advisor at the Municipal Engineers Association. And without further ado, Paul, the floor is yours.
Thanks very much, Amin. Good to have such a nice crowd. It shows there's a lot of interest in this. You've already heard a bit about me. So this afternoon, some of you will have noticed we advertised a session, and it was originally we thought we'd talk about Indigenous consultation and climate change, and then the old Part 2 order, or the new Part 2 order request process. And then all of a sudden the ministry took us by surprise and announced they approved the amendment to the Class EA. So I think this is, of course, a more relevant topic and something everybody's keen about. So today I want to talk a little bit about that actual document, what's the status of it. And one of the key things we were trying to accomplish in this amendment was shifting projects from Schedule BC into ARA Plus for the exempt. Not everything we had applied for was included. There are some transition provisions that we'll talk about briefly. This is if you've got a project in the midst of, you're in the middle of the process, and the rules change. What do you do? quick talk about cost thresholds and about not elevating exempted projects, and what we're going to do about future amendments and clarifications, and then the future training coming up. So it's going to be just a quick overview we're going to get into this afternoon, and then there will be more detailed training coming up. So I'm going to try and get through this in around an hour. So between 3 and 3:30, we should be able to wrap up. So the manual. So the ministry actually has prepared the manual. They have put the 2023 PDF version of it on the Environmental Registry of Ontario. So it's available for anybody to look at there that you'd like. On the Municipal Engineers website, on the MEA website, we still have the 2015 version up there. It's been discontinued. There was a note to that effect, but some people still want to reference it for, well, for one thing, if you're in this transition, some projects will still be following. Anyway, that's the version that's there. Be careful, it's not the new version. We haven't put the new version up. We're working at developing a user's guide. So we're going to prepare a document that has explanations and useful hints, and mesh it together with the text from the approved Class EA, and try and make that available both digital and hard copy. So that's taking some time. As I said, we were quite caught by surprise when the ministry actually announced things. So sorry, we're not prepared, but I guess we didn't have much notice. So anyway, that's what's going on. And so if you want to view a copy of the approved current Class EA, the 2023 Class E, it's available on the Environmental Registry. So let's jump right in and talk about, there's 8, the big changes. The changes I think that are most significant in this amendment are the changes to Appendix 1. And I guess the big things, they're really what we were trying to do here is shift projects that are fairly routine, fairly low risk, and move them from B or C down to A or A plus. So you're really moving them from subject to the MCEA process to exempt. And these are shifted, but they are conditional upon, you see this ASP, and that's archaeological screening process. So it's not they're just shifted. It's not that they're just shifted and that's all you have to worry about. You do have to follow the archaeological screening process, deal with the issues, any issues regarding archaeology, and after you've successfully completed that, they become exempt. There are other changes to Appendix 1, I mentioned, and then there are other changes to Part A of the document as well. And one of them is Section A14 transition, and we'll talk about that a little later. So just jumping right in, the first project we see that has been shifted is this initial stockpiling. So a salt shed. If you're going to build a salt dome or salt shed, it has always been a Schedule B. And we argued that if you're building a salt shed that has an impervious floor and it's not located in or adjacent to an environmental sensitive area, and then you verify that during construction you're not going to disturb any archaeological artifacts, or once you get that clearance, it then shifts from Schedule B to A plus. So that's the first, and that seems like a sensible thing. Once you've dealt with those issues, there's no need to do the Schedule B. You can shift it to exempt. Now, the second one here is, and you notice it's number 12B, is the construction of new parking lots that are not in an environmentally sensitive area, adjacent to a sensitive area, residential, etc. And then you'd have to go through the screening process. But you notice that the dollar figure here is greater than $12 million. Because in the current municipal, or not the current thing, in the former municipal Class CA, construction less than $12 million has always been exempted. So that remains in effect. So it's only those parking lots over 12 million that if you meet these other conditions, you can shift it from Schedule B to Schedule A plus, which is exempt. Now, I would think most municipalities don't build too many parking lots that are over $12 million. So this is not going to come into play for most things, because most parking lots are less than 12 million, and it is Schedule A and remains Schedule A. Another new thing is 14B. This is right now 14A in the document talks about a new local road that's built as part of a subdivision. That again has always been the case. They're exempted. It's done through the subdivision process, but if it's a collector or an arterial, it was not exempt through the subdivision process. You had to complete a Class CA. So we worked with the ministry on this, and there's again a process here. And you see here, there's two conditions. Here it can be exempted if you satisfy the archaeological one, and then there's another one called CR, which stands for collector road screening process. So there's another screening road process. So if you do those two things, then your collector road, if it meets those criteria, can be shifted into exempt. But that doesn't apply to arterial roads, and it does not apply to the bridges that might be located on these roads. So we when MEA applied for the amendment, we had included collector and arterial roads and the associated bridges. But all that's in the document the minister approved is the collector roads. So I think we need some further work on this one. Another one that's shifted here is traffic control devices, signalization. Again, it's always been exempted if it's less than 12 million. Now, if you complete the archaeological screening process and it costs more than 12 million, it could be shifted from Schedule B to exempt. But again, I don't think municipalities ought to spend more than $12 million on traffic signals. Same idea for lighting, high mass grooving, these safety projects. Again, it's a lower cost threshold here. I don't know if municipalities are going to get into projects greater than $3 million. If you do, there's this mechanism to get it shifted from Schedule B to Schedule A plus. Then we jump ahead to bridges. And here, so if we have a bridge that's a bridge that has cultural heritage values, so it has to have. If it doesn't have cultural heritage value, it's exempt. But if it does have cultural value, and it will be conserved in accordance with a heritage impact assessment. So there's the new bridge checklist basically comes into effect with the passage of the amendment to this document. And there's going to be separate training on this. It'll show you how you go through a checklist, and you can decide that yes, it does or doesn't have heritage value. It has heritage value, and you hire the heritage consultant, and you follow the advice of the heritage consultant and the heritage impact assessment, and you do the archaeological screening process. Once you do those things, then you don't have to do a Schedule B. So this is shifted. So again, there'll be separate training on this. In a similar vein, this is for the pedestrian or agricultural non-vehicle bridges. And there's these conditions not be located in a sensitive area. And then it has to, you have to verify archaeology, and then you can shift it, and it has to be over 3 million, anything less than 3 million. So again, many of your projects, this won't impact, because if they're less than 3 million, they always have been exempt and they continue to be exempt. Then in sewer and water, there's pumping stations. There's new pumping stations where you're going to put new equipment in a new building. So again, this is something that previously was a Schedule B and can be shifted once you satisfy the archaeological. And finishing up with the 5D here, the pumping station is not located in an environmentally sensitive area. So if you're building a brand new station and you're not in an environmentally sensitive area, again, you can get shifted out of Schedule B into A. And basically, it's the same as true for water storage facilities. It's the same logic. And here's one about a new well on an existing well site. So it doesn't include a new water system, but it can be shifted from a B into an A plus if it's an existing well site. And you verify the archaeology. Sewer connections for disposal of process waste. So if you're building a connection from your water plant into your wastewater system, same thing. This is the disposal of the wastewater. So this is the same thing. You got to meet all these conditions that are in here, and you do the ESP. Then it becomes a B. And this is before the pumping stations we were talking about were in a water system. So this is really the same things, except it's in the wastewater system. So the same kind of changes. So again, the same thing. Once you meet these conditions and follow the ASP, you can become exempt. The project can be exempt. So here's for equalization tankage. So this is something it'll work on your property at a treatment facility. Satisfy the archaeological, you can go ahead and shift it into A plus. If you must acquire property, you're scheduled. Here's if your LID was low impact design, these features have started to become more common, and yet they weren't mentioned in the Class EA at all. So now they're mentioned, and you can see if you're establishing new, modified, and retrofitting, you're doing anything, and they're in an existing utility corridor. You don't have to do a B, you just have to verify the archaeological screening process, and then it becomes the Schedule A, an exempt project. So this is water crossings. So when you're doing work, as long as you don't require property, you can get it classified as exempt if you get the archaeological issues dealt with in the ASP. So I guess that's the 18 of them. You can see there's a number of, there's some that are like the parking lot. It's not, municipalities just don't build parking lots of that scope, but there's many of them that happen on a regular basis, and so I think it's going to be very beneficial to municipalities. So there's a few other changes. We haven't quite got them all identified yet, but we're working on it. Another thing they did is in the former document, bridges were classified the same as roads. They had the same dollar values, and which made a division between B and C. And the ministry has removed that dollar value and just made them all Schedule B. So there's no requirement for a bridge to follow the Schedule C process. Although when I think about it, most times the bridge, if you're following a Schedule C, is because you're expanding the capacity of the bridge, adding travel lanes. If you're adding travel lanes to a bridge, chances are pretty high you're going to be adding travel lanes to a road at the same time. So it's really part of a joint project, bridge and road. And dollar values are still in for the road. So it seems like the Schedule C for the combined project would still remain. So I'm not sure it really accomplished much. But anyway, that's see how that one unfolds. So a few things that are not included, as I mentioned earlier, the arterial roads and associated bridges. We have a ministry requiring, and it was a Schedule C process for a private apartment building to have a well to service an apartment building as a new water system. And this is just, if it's all not associated with the municipality, just a building with its own private well. And we felt that should have been addressed. And another thing is we had identified there's a lot of minor expansions to treatment facilities that require a Schedule C, and yet it's really just a technical exercise, and that there's other mechanisms. So we were disappointed that wasn't included, and we would hope to bring that forward later. Transition. So the transition section, you can see here there's 3 categories. So if the notice of commencement has not been issued, or if the notice has been issued, the notice of completion has not, or the notice of completion has been issued. So those are the 3 situations. So if the notice of commencement has not been issued, well, it's pretty clear. There's no transition. You must follow the 2023 amended municipal class EA. Fairly straightforward. So if you have issued the notice of commencement but have not issued the notice of completion, so you're in the middle of the process someplace, here the proponent can choose. You can choose to continue with the the former Class EA, the 2015 Class EA, or you can transition the project to the 2023 process. And of course, what you might be thinking is that my project got shifted from Schedule B process to exempted. So I'd like to take advantage of that shift and transition the project. So one thing you're required to do, at least just think about, is it appropriate to transfer? You have to use some judgment and see is it appropriate to transfer the project to exempt? And that might relate to how far along in the process you are. If you issued your notice of completion 2 weeks ago and you really haven't started gathering any data, you might want to transition. But if you've already had a public meeting and you're just about ready to issue the notice of completion, you probably don't want to bother transitioning. So anyway, you have to make that decision. If you choose to transition, first of all, you must do the archaeological screening process and go through that, which you probably would have done anyway for the Schedule B. You would have done essentially the same work. So it's the same work, you just it might be presented a little differently. So you must do that. And then you must issue a notice, and it goes to the ministry and to all Indigenous communities That's what it says it has to, but I would think you'd be wanting to obviously let all stakeholders know. And you explain, this is the project, it's been reclassified, and here's the reasons, the results of our ASP, and here's the reasons why we're going to shift it. And when you send that to the Indigenous communities, it even spells right out in the section the ministry put in the document that you must give them 60 days to comment and deliver it by 2 methods and have at least 1 follow-up. And if there are Indigenous concerns, then the project is not allowed to be, it cannot be transitioned into exempt. You need to follow the Schedule B. However, if transition, you must follow, oh, sorry, I backed up. And the notice of completion has been issued. Well, you completed the process, so you're going to work with this. There may have been the ability to shift it, but you've already finished the process. So you're going to work with the documents that have been approved through the former process. Now, one thing that also can happen is a shift from Schedule C to B, and that's different because it's not going exempt, you're still within the process. So here, if you're going to take advantage of a shift from C to B, you need to notify everybody. And one thing you might want to think about is if you're going to shift the project from C to B, usually in the process at the second public meeting, you're reviewing detailed design concepts. And you might want to just say, yes, we're going to shift it, and we'll only have one public meeting at the Schedule B, but we're going to include some design concepts at that single PIC. And so you're really covering both things. You just hurry up and you get your process condensed a little, I guess. So anyway, there is the ability, there are a couple of projects that shifted from C to B. As an example, the bridge I mentioned. So the cost thresholds, we've heard a lot in the last little while with the high inflation about getting the cost thresholds updated and adjusted for inflation. And many of you will have read that ever since 2011, the MEA just had the ability to adjust those, look at it, use NTO's index to adjust them and announce it, and that was it. But in the 2023 amendment, the ministry took away the authority for MEA to do that, and the ministry is going to adjust them annually. So they have adjusted them to, you can see 9.5 to 12 million. I've been mentioning this number. So they have been adjusted. Those numbers are incorporated into the 2023 book. The only disappointing part is they're already a year out of date. They were based on the numbers from March 2022. So we have already asked the ministry to, well, okay, and you're going to update them annually, so please go ahead and update them to 2023 now, because it's 2023. So I don't know the timing for that, but we have asked that that get done. I put a slide in here for questions, but as Anand mentioned, I think with the number of people, it just probably is not going to be possible. But I would encourage you to put questions into the Q&A section. We're going to be preparing for more detailed training, and we'll certainly review them, and that'll give us a flavor for what questions or what people are really interested in, try and cover it off when we develop our training.
Paul, just to interrupt a bit, there's a few questions that can be a bit timely. One is asking, is all of these updates effective March 3rd? Everything that you talked about?
Yes, it is. Yeah, there's subject to that transition. So if you're in the middle of if you're in the middle of a project, you have to sit down and decide, do you want to transition or not? So that's why I wanted to talk about transition today. But
All
yeah,
right.
the document is in force and effect.
And
Okay.
there's another question asking, has there been a new heritage bridge checklist generated?
Yes, we actually prepared it a number of years ago, but it sat on the shelf waiting for this amendment to give it force and effect. So, and again, we're planning training on and the very first part just copies the bridge clauses out of the Class EA. So, and then it goes into a checklist. So yes, we're just finalizing that up, and that's going to be in future training topics.
Thank you. Those are only the two questions that I thought were timely for this for now.
Okay, thanks, Amin. So something I wanted to mention is that, again, what has come into effect, not so much with it wasn't really the amendment, but to our document, it was the change in legislation that you can no longer elevate a Schedule A or A plus exempted project into B or C. You know, you remember there was always this section in the manual that talked about, you know, if you think there's a lot of public involvement and it's a more complex project, you should use your judgment and elevate. Well, those words are still there, but that's only elevating from B to C. What happened is that back in 2019, the More Homes, More Choice Act that passed included this section here, this section 4, where the act exempts certain projects from the act. And you can see the list here, there's GO Transit Provincial, but what it does is exempt Schedules A and A plus of municipal class environmental assessment approved under order. So the legislation actually says that projects are exempt. So you can't voluntarily, you can't then choose to say, well, I think this project is special and we shouldn't exempt it. It should follow the process, because the act kind of overrides that. You know, when you look at legislative hierarchy, you know, we're down at the bottom of, we've got a municipal Class EA, which gets approved by a minister, so it had words in it that said you could elevate, and above a minister's approval is cabinet approval, and above that is a parliamentary act. Well, when the act says, and I'll just use the example of a parking lot less than $12 million. So the act says, right, that a parking lot less than $12 million is exempt. You can't overrule the act and go and say, well, we think it's should be a D because we're near the water, for example. Well, the act doesn't say that. The act says less than $12 million is exempt, end of discussion. So in the new 2023 Class EA, Section A122 is the section that talks about this. And you read this down, it says, for Schedule B projects, the proponent may, at its discretion, decide to carry out the process for a Schedule C project. For Schedule C projects, the proponent may decide to carry out an individual. Proponents of exempted projects may decide to carry out an EA-like process outside the EA Act regime, which we would encourage. So this parking lot that's going to be, say you're going to build this parking lot down by a boat launch or down by the river, you'd have to get all the appropriate permits from the Conservation Authority. And you may well decide that it is in the best interest of the community to have a meeting and do the reports, and very similar to what you might do for a Class EA. So there's a lot of lessons there, but it's not. At the end, there's no notice of commencement and no notice of completion. You could do everything else, but not those things. So just a little graphic to demonstrate. So you can elevate Schedule B to C, C to comprehensive, but exempted ones can't get elevated, but they can have a process that's similar. So this fall, when I was looking through the list of active Class EA projects out of, I think it was 170, it certainly seemed to me that 23 of those projects were probably classified inappropriately. They really shouldn't have been on the list because they're exempt. They should have been exempted projects. And we're going to be contacting those people and letting them know. I'm sure nobody's in trouble for doing it, but it's unnecessary. We're going to be trying to promote that and get the word out to proponents that it is not necessary. Now, amendments and clarifications. So we got this document a couple of weeks ago now, and we've been looking through it. And here's one we noticed. It's a heading in a table in Appendix 1, and it says sewer systems, maintenance, operation, distribution, storage, and retirement. Well, it's clear, it's clearly just a little typo. Forgot to change when the water system got done. Probably said water system, maintenance, storage, distribution. Anyway, it got copied, went down to the sewer, but they forgot to change distribution to collection. Not a big deal, just a minor issue. But it brings up the whole topic of, well, should be changed. How do we do that? How do we do that little change? And then who keeps track of those changes and makes sure that we have this is the current, the approved document. Even making a little change like that, we still have to be careful to track and say now, okay, now this is the approved document that says, has that correction. And it turns out the EA Act, this is a change. It gives the director to make an amendment to correct errors that are editorial or typographical in nature. And I would certainly think that would fall in that category. So that change, the director, it looks like it's a pretty simple process. Just have the director authorize that change. And then we just need some kind of tracking process that, that says on the front cover, this is the change as amended on, like that was approved on March 5th or whatever it was, and say they changed this in April. This is the April whatever date, and we've corrected typographical errors. So we'll have to try and figure out how that process is going to work. I've kind of raised the topic and really haven't gotten an answer. But it brings up another point is in the last little while, MEA's heard from different proponents about the ministry coming and saying, for example, a municipality was going to build a beach, relocate a beach, I think it was. Another time was about a boat launch. And they were being told by ministry staff, well, you need to do a Schedule B or a C. I forget which they said, but they had to do a B or C. And of course, there are beaches and boat launches are never mentioned in our Class EA. There's no recreational facilities are ever mentioned. So we wonder about that. And another interesting one, the ministry came out and told the municipality that they needed, there was clearly a Schedule A plus project. The only project was widening a road to the current lane width platform. So they were just going to upgrade the width of the lanes a little bit. But yet, if you're faced with a significant increase in the traffic volumes and the percent increase, so it wasn't even the traffic was going up a lot. It was if you only got one or two houses, your traffic is near zero, and all of a sudden it grows to 1,000 cars a day. Well, that's a huge percent increase. It's still not very much traffic. It's not that the traffic is high. It's just a very, very large increase. And that's what they're saying that should trigger a B or C process. And we're sort of saying, well, I doubt it. That doesn't strike us as being appropriate. And then another one, the minister is saying, well, you're changing the designation of a road to a local, from a local to a local corrector. And that should trigger a process. Well, again, there's nothing about that in the current document, that it supports these interpretations. So again, we go back to this, the minister, the director does have the ability to interpret things. You see the last one for clarifying the existing text of the Class CA. But I think it's important to read the whole thing. So the director may amend the Class CA to make one of the more following administrative changes. So they can't just interpret it and say, well, this is what it means. They need to go and amend the document to make it clear what they need. So if they're not satisfied, and they think that a beach should be included in somewhat one of the other descriptions, they have to amend the document to put a beach in so that it's clear to everybody. And so we're having this discussion with the ministry, and they have not responded yet. So I throw this out to the group. If you run across a situation like this, please let us know. We're just concerned that the ministry, different ministry staff are making different interpretations that probably others in the ministry don't even know about, and certainly the wider community doesn't know about. And of course, it should be consistent across the province. So, the MCA is a self-assessment process. The ministry certainly has responsibility for compliance, but the director can amend to clarify the text. But it's not until they do an amendment that it's there. This is a note that will be in our user manual. If there's a disagreement and the ministry doesn't like the way something's being interpreted, they certainly have the authority to issue an addendum to clarify and clarify their wishes. But that amendment's going to have some process that makes sure that Municipal Engineers Association, as the proponent, at least hears about it, for example. And I think we insist on, there's going to be some notice to people. If it's a change of significance, there should be input and comment on the impacts across the province understood before it's implemented. So again, I'm raising this topic and if any of you have come across a similar issue, please let us know so we can try and address it. Now, on another topic that's sort of completely separate from the new manual, right at the same, within days, a new environmental registry posting came out, and the comments are due May 9th. And it wasn't really new. It's a reposting for the most part. What we saw in at least 2 years ago, I believe it was in 2021. The ministry has been saying that this approving a new Class EA is just an interim step, and then they want to actually replace it, throw it away, and create a new regulation. And I guess maybe not so much throw away as continue to evolve it into a new. So, you know, the work and the definition of projects and all the work they're doing is, in theory, not to be lost. It would get transitioned into these new regulations. And there's two things to happen. One, instead of there being the list in our Class EA, which has a list of exempted and Bs and Cs, there would be the separate list on a separate ministry document someplace, like a regulation, I guess, that would list, and it would be the reverse. Right now, the way the Act reads, all projects are captured by the Act, and unless you're exempted, so you have to find a project in Schedule A or Schedule A plus. If you find the project, it's exempted. If you don't, then it's captured. It would be the other way around. No project is captured unless it's on the list. So the list would be the Bs and Cs, and anything not on the list is not there. And so, for example, like LEDs that, you know, weren't on the list, they're not on the list, they're not captured. Until there's an amendment to put them on the list, they're not captured. So I kind of explained the list thing, and the problem or the concern with that I think we have to be very careful with is the ministry's intent is that any project on that list, doesn't matter who the proponent was, there is, including the private sector. So, you know, I just think about roads. Well, municipalities build lots of, you know, there's gravel and pavement and curbs, and we build lots of roads and parks and waste sites. Private organizations build roads. You know, at a shopping center, there's roads, bridges. There's a lot of traffic moving stuff that could be called roads. Does that mean the private sector is going to have to start doing Schedule C? You know, Schedule C of the road they build to access their industry and access their commercial property. Pumping stations. You know, there's a municipal pumping station inside a building out on the street, or there's lots of buildings and industries that have pumping stations internal in their buildings that pump, you know, both sewage and well, the high rises would all have booster pumps that pump water up to upper floors. I mentioned about private wells. We get, you know, apparently the ministry feels that anything other than a single family private house that's on a well, if you build a 2-unit place and served by a well, that's a drinking water system and you're subject to Schedule C of the Class EA. Shoreline work, it's quite a different story. You know, beaches, but shoreline work of putting something along some work along the shoreline. If it's a private owner doing some work or a developer, I think there's got to be some definite difference between a municipality taking on a large project and one homeowner doing a little bit of work on that property. You know, bridges, again, anything over 3 meters is called a bridge. I'm sure there's lots of commercial and industrial properties that have all kinds of bridges, and so not so much a municipal concern, but a societal concern. I'm concerned about these definitions. And then from a process, they're talking about a regulation. And the only example we have is OREG 23108, which is the transit reg, or TPAP, the name for it. And, you know, I'm not going to try and even explain it, but there's flow charts from both processes. They both have some timelines. And the advantage that people talk about with transit is that it's a quick process. And it is, from when they issue their notice of commencement to the notice of completion. But before you issue your notice of commencement, you do what's called pre-planning activities. And you start off by contacting ministries and identifying issues, and you do all of these things right up, and you see down at the bottom, go to municipal council with a draft environmental project report instead of just study report, change the name a little bit, establish those, so you're done. And then you issue the notice of commencement. Well, yeah, so no wonder it goes quick, because you've already finished the process, and then you have 120 days to get your notice of completion, and then it carries on. So it's just reorganizing the same thing. You know, I think it's more or less the same activities reorganized a little differently. And so 2 years ago, when this topic came up, municipal engineers did submit and said, well, maybe you could improve it. Here's something a little different, but there's going to be notices, there's going to be consultation with the public, there's going to be evaluations, options considered, presentation, and whether it gets jigged around or changed a little, and the names of the, this is a notice of initiation instead of commencement, and this is a notice of completion, or notice of formal consideration. Those are just small details, and we'll see what the ministry progresses on that. But anyway, that's what's going on. Is if you saw that posting, and it really isn't related to the new Class EA that was approved, only that it might lead to something that replaces it at some point in time. We'll see how that progresses. So we're just about getting to the end of my slides here. So what we're trying to put some effort into is getting a presentation ready that would walk you through the Appendix 1 road section. Look at every detail and look at all our user guide comments about it. And we're trying to get that ready for May 12th. Pull out water, wastewater on the 15th. Transit, I don't think there's as big a demand for that, so we'll not focus on that first. Heritage bridges, I believe there's going to be a real demand, so May 16th. Don't have a date yet, but the archaeological screening process, clearly people are going to have to use it sooner rather than later. I mean, you can go read it yourself, but at least I think some guidance is going to be very helpful. I know I read it and been involved, and it needs, I think we're going to try and come up with some examples, probably involve an archaeologist, and try and get you some good advice of how to follow this properly. Then there's part A that has numerous changes. What we were supposed to talk about today was in part A, Indigenous consultation, climate change, those things. So there's a number of other changes in there. So target that probably the end of June, honestly, before we get to that. We have a course coming up June 19th to 21st. We scheduled this. This is our introduction. This is our sort of 3-afternoon training session that we do on an ongoing basis, but we'll update that curriculum to reflect the new Class EA. And then, as I mentioned, the collector roads, we think some more work's required there, and it's going to take a while to get something ready, so it'll likely be in the fall. And we'll keep everybody up to date on what we hear about these project lists and the new regulation. Ministry said it's coming soon, and we started saying that about 3-4 years ago, so we'll see. Anyway, that's the slides that I've prepared, and again, we'll pause again for a few, see if Amin has identified any theme to the questions, and I can address as much as I can today. So, got anything in there?
No, nothing like earlier. I'll keep you posted though.
Okay. Yeah, certainly. If people, are we getting lots of questions in the Q&A section in then, or?
Yeah, we have 50 so far.
Oh, okay.
Some are quite long and detailed, some are just basically a yes or no.
Okay. Yeah, well, obviously the long and detailed ones take a little work. We have a few minutes. If you just want to read a few of the yes/no ones, we can try and address a couple of them here that they're using.
Sure. Okay. Is there a specific date for the NOC transition threshold?
I guess it's just the date depends on your when your project started. Like the effective date of was March 6th, whatever date the minister signed the amendment, it became effective. So the only date you need to worry about is what was the date of your notice of commencement or your notice of completion.
Mm-hmm. Trying to go through them.
Yeah, it's going to take a while. It's probably take a while to analyze those questions.
Yeah, I agree, because they're coming in faster than I can read them.
Well, we'd certainly better not shut down the webinar and allow people some time to get the questions typed in.
Okay. Second. Does the preliminary design need to be included in the ESR before filing it in Schedule C? This is a general, I guess, question.
Well, the level of detail you put in your ESR is really up to the proponent. You need to describe your preferred solution. But is that a preliminary design or conceptual? That's and that has nothing to do with the amendment, of course. That's just an ongoing question.
I see. And here's a simple yes or no. Are there any changes to the schedules B and C addendum process?
No.
Okay.
I don't believe so. That is something I have just a little, a bit of a concern is that the ministry, they did call us the day before the amendment and say, well, by the way, this is getting approved. And we said, what's getting approved? They said, well, you'll see it tomorrow. And so we started looking at it, and we've actually asked for a copy of that would identify the changes, and they haven't seen fit to provide us with one. So it's kind of relying on us to read it and say, and then either remember or go back and look in another document and say, oh, is this the same or not? So I'm hoping we're picking up all the changes, and I don't recall seeing any changes in that. But I admit I haven't got through every paragraph of the entire document to see if I've missed any changes.
Here's another question, just clarifying something. Roundabout projects are classified as Schedule A+, so similar to parking lots, the roundabouts cannot be elevated to Schedule B. Does that sound correct?
Well, that's what I would have told you until I found the part in the new document, the approved document, where they inserted roundabouts, and I'm going from memory now. I think it's exempt if it's less than $12 million and you don't need to buy any property.
Mm-hmm.
So the ministry has, before roundabouts was not included. They have included it now, and I just going from memory, I think that's what they put it in that category. Right. So yeah, there's a number of changes like that. But obviously, it'll be important that training session coming up in May on the details on the schedules will be important.
question if you can provide more info on projects where the schedule was not appropriate. Can you share, the question is, can you share an example of a nature of the project?
I think you're asking, like, why did a project get elevated? I'm not sure I understand
I
the
could
question.
elaborate more on what the person intended. I'll see if they restate their question.
Okay. Anyway, I apologize for that was a quick overview, but that's all we really had planned for today, was to just to let you know, you really need, detailed training, I would think, and that's not going to be ready for a while, but we wanted to make sure we got out with something just to let you know the status of things.
All right. Well, thank you very much, Paul. And
So I'd suggest we keep things open until the questions are not coming in anymore. If they're still coming in, we should keep it open.
yeah, they are coming in, and
Okay.
yeah, what I'll do is I'll basically just say have a good day to everyone, and I'll end the recording, and I'll keep it going so that we can record all the questions.
Okay.
And feel free to sign off, Paul, if you'd like, or hang along if you have time and you'd want to sit through. All right, thank you, everyone. Okay. If you have a question, please go ahead and type it in the Q&A. We're gonna end the webinar, but we'll keep the Zoom. We'll end the presentation part and the discussion part. We'll keep the Zoom going so that you have a chance to enter your questions, and we'll be able to collect them from us. Thank you very much for taking time out of your busy schedule to listen to our updates today. And thank you to Paul for providing the MCEA updates for our members.
Oh, you're welcome, Ben, and thanks for everybody for attending, and we'll probably be talking to you in a month or so.